So last night I put together the majority of my Kossel All Metal 230mm from Makergeeks, and just want to show you some of the problems I'd been having and some of the other issues that are going on, but it actually physically went together really easily. Up here at the top we just have some Allen screws, and you just had to put on these 3 brackets. And I detached this motor, which was relatively easy. The filler straw, we just had to connect it up. Down at the bottom was a similar thing. There are 3 panels. The only thing you have to be careful of with the panels is that there's one that's not like the other one. And so this one has 4 holes, and I'm just guessing at what goes in through each hole. So far I have 1 empty hole. Alright, the one thing that I did not see a spot for was that this did not go through any hole. The connectors don't fit, and so I'm just draping it underneath for right now. Let's see, this one is also different because we're screwing in the drive motor here. Let me show you one thing that took me a little while to figure out. Up here is the fan. And the fan, what it does is it blows out the bottom. There's a little slot on the bottom, and there's a bracket, and I kind of took a guess, and there's a copper bracket, and that's probably bent a little bit too much now, but there's a copper bracket here that screws underneath, and maybe it screws to the top, and maybe that's my problem. I think if I screw it to the top, we can actually get this to connect up, and so I'm going to switch that out now. And let me see. As far as physically putting it together, it wasn't that hard. The other thing is to leave, so there's, on each corner, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5, 6 screws. And you want to leave those all a little loose until they're all in. It's a very tight, which I like. It's a very tight corner on all these. And then once they're in, then you can you can tighten them all up once everything is all together. There's also the spool holder. It's kind of flimsy, but that's it. Okay, let's go on to wiring. There are, and I'm not super impressed with this, but there are 3 of these Hall effect sensors, and in the top of each arm there's a magnet right there, and you can see. So the Hall effect sensors are used as a limit switch. I'm not super duper excited about that, and they're held on by a little plastic glue, a little glue tape. And this one has already come off, which I'm kind of bummed about. So I think I'm going to use some hot glue or some other kind there. And it does bring some questions. This one, so one of them has to drape across, and just want to warn you, they aren't quite long enough to wrap around the inside edge. So you either have to get your own servo wire would work, because it's just a 3-line. But the one was, I had to go back and refeed it through my wrap after I got my wrap all on. I probably should have plugged everything in before I got my wrap on. So wait till the last minute to do the wrapping. So from the top here, there are those 3 wires, and then the motor has 4 wires: blue, red, black, and green. Okay. The head came all as one unit except for that fan there, and there are, well, now 4 sets of wires. Okay, there's one from the fan. You should be able to figure that one out. There's an extension that comes with that just plugs straight in. Make sure you get the polarity right. There is the big red wires, and I did not wrap those with the other wires. The big red wires are to heat the extruder. There is this little, it's a little flex cable that gets plugged into right here. And then there's these white wires. Okay, the flex cable gets plugged into a red and black connector right here. So there's a red and black wire. And then there's 2 white wires here. Let me see if I can explain what each of them are. The white wires are the heat feedback, the temperature probe, the thermocouple, whatever you want to call it. Okay, that's what the white ones are. And I believe they're marked CJ on one end of it. This one is kind of interesting. It's basically, there's a variable resistor that when I press on the head, it takes the resistance between those 2 places very large. Okay, between those two lines, if I press on the head, so there's not much movement, there's not a limit switch, it's going to self-level off of pressure, which I kind of like, actually. I kind of like that design. I'm a little bit worried because it's next to hot stuff. I'm worried, like, it's underneath this head. I'm a little worried that it might get too hot and melt over time and I have to replace it on a regular basis. So that's my biggest concern. And there we go. That's the big part of it. Let me turn it over so we can get a good idea of what goes on underneath, what you need to plug into. And that's actually where I'm the most confused. So this is the underneath. There's this nice switching power supply. You have to wire up your own cable. Now I put a knot here so it doesn't pull against the screws. There are 3 terminals. There's N, L, and ground right here. And neutral I plugged into white, which is the N. L I'm assuming is live, which worked. So I think that's right. Which I turned into black, and there is no ground. It's just a 2-wire probe. This little adapter board here came in the kit. I had to plug it in. It was actually really simple to figure out. There's an EXP1 and EXP2, and you have to make sure that it plugs into here where it says EXP1, EXP2. And then this entire board, actually, it came off like this. It plugs onto the board. So I'm going to leave that off for now so that we don't have to worry about it. And then this board here is I forget what the name of it is. 1.4. It's some kind of, it's a very standard board with an Arduino Mega that controls it. The problem is that it comes with just standard Cartesian style motor controller, 3D printer software on it, so you have to reflash it. They didn't do us the service. Now let's look through, and there's a whole bunch of wires that come through. First of all, there's a Z, and this is a Z probe. And so what I did is the Z probe, I marked right here that this was Z that was attached to that limit switch there before I wrapped everything up. And then I did the same thing here, that this one is Y and this one over here is X. And so that's something you're probably going to want to do before you get everything wrapped up. Okay, there's also 4 motors underneath here, and I had to plug those in. So my Z, these are all labeled XYZ, and I had to look on the, I think it's the Blomker, B-L-O-M-K-E-R website for how to wire this together. And the way that I did it is, if you look at it like this, we have blue, red, green, black for all 3 of those, and that seems to work so far. There's the 4th motor, which comes from up top, which is right here, and it's attached. Okay, and I don't know if you can tell, but it's right there. You have to be careful. You can get off by 1 pin for these. Okay, and so that was marked JCJ, and I'm not sure what JCJ stands for. Once again, there are no instructions. There's one that's marked FS. This is this is the fan. Okay, and there's an auxiliary power. Polarity is important here. Okay, so in other words, get the red side on the positive side, the black side on the negative side. This is CW, which I don't know what it stands for, but it plugs into like the T0, T1 pin. This is the temperature feedback that we have. And then the one that I don't know where it goes is marked TP, and this is the pressure, the touch pressure. Maybe that's what it stands for. This is the touch pressure. Now I believe it plugs into one of these 6 pin headers, and these are these are DC voltage on the right hand side, ground, and then signal on the left. And so typically, this is an example. I don't think this one's plugged in the right place, but we have red for voltage, ground, and then signal is the green wire. And this happens to be the Z Hall effect sensor. But I don't know exactly if it plugs into here. The markings tell me that it should be 1 row down. The instructions on Blomker tell me that it should be right where it is. And then we have the 3, then there are 3 of those. There's X, Y, and Z, and TP. So what I don't know where they plug in is X, Y, Z, and TP, which are the limit switches. And I'm pretty sure that all 6 of these are limit switches. Now you notice that TP is only 2 wide. and that's because it does not need to be powered to send back a signal. The X, Y, and Z do because they're Hall effect sensors. I suppose something that I could do is I could replace those Hall effect sensors with just regular limit switches, and I'm a little bit worried about that. Worried about doing that because I don't know about the software. The other thing, and this is the last thing, so there's a USB cable here that I have feeding out, and it plugs into the computer, and that's how you're going to get the firmware using using the Arduino base, and that doesn't cost anything, but you have to. I mean, it's a crapshoot of what you're going to get when you do it. I used Marlin Delta Print on that, and that was on the Blomker website as well. And so I want to warn you to go to there and figure it out. And I was able to get it to move, okay? But it was constantly telling me that my limit switches were on, and so my limit switches are not right. And so I think that there has to be either modification from code. Right now I'm waiting for an email back from Makergeeks, and we're waiting for that. Other than that, I really like the design. I like how smoothly it went together. I just wish there would have been some instructions in the box that help me with a few of these things. I hope this helps you out with just a little bit more. When I figure out the wiring of those Hall effect sensors and the software, I will make another couple videos so that we can print. But other than that, this has been kind of a fun project. It was really easy to build. It took about an hour to put it together as you see it now. It actually took a little bit longer than that because I was monkeying with it. It should only take you about an hour to put together everything as is. And the software is going to take another hour to get running and get working the way you want it to. Just a reminder, when you do run the software, have your hand on the power switch. Oh, that's one thing I forgot. There's a power switch that you have to wire up. Have your hand on the power switch in case it hits a rail or hits the ground or hits the top or whatever and starts shaking. Make sure you have your finger on that. Don't just let it ruin your motors or your belts. Let's look at the power switch. That's the last thing. There were 2 white wires that were underneath here initially. They're the only 2 free white wires, and they just have not gator clips, but little pin clips here. And I just snapped in the push button here, and put those on, and that seemed to work really well so far. So when I get the rest of this, I'll post it to YouTube, and I hope you enjoy this. I hope it helps you get over some of the hurdles before you make the same mistakes I did.